am back with part 3 of my relationship series with Nathaniel Mcguire, who is the founder and CEO of Empower Counseling, Coaching, and Spiritual Direction. He is a very sought after and amazing marriage and family therapist. And today, Nathaniel, in part 3, I'd like to start out talking about the foundation for let's say a workable relationship, starting with being in integrity. And so for the audience, I will define what integrity is. From my perspective, it's being able to be authentic and to be yourself, to be true to yourself, and not being afraid of being honest. A person who is in integrity, will they'll stand up for what they believe in. There's a saying that people who, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. And so my experience has been that the whole foundation for relationships is having integrity. If you have one person who is in integrity and they can be true and honest and authentic, and the other person is out of integrity, you've got a relationship that is pretty much doomed to fail from the beginning. So would you address that whole issue of integrity? Because across the board, I think that's missing in so many of our relationships, whether it's family, friends, or business.
I love this topic because dealing with relationships, marriage, couples, and families, and most importantly, children, this human development piece and arrested development have a lot to do with what you're saying. So I said a mouthful, but what I mean is, when you're trying to find out who you are, a part of this process is a journey, as you know more than anybody. But there's also this immature state and this mature state. So you have someone that is growing, trying to discover who they are, but they may still be in a childlike state. So arrested development all has to do, Dr. Grant, with some type of trauma or something that has happened in your life, and you're arrested at that point that trauma has happened. So literally, you could be 50 or 40, but you're the same age emotionally as when you were traumatized. Yes. So many of us, I found, are really in this childlike state still, so we don't really know who we are. When you're a child, your parents tell you how to be. They tell you where to go. You can't make decisions for yourself. Mm-hmm. When you're a child, you're very fearful about things. You want to fight or flight.
Yes.
It's hard to understand nuance. People are bad or they're good.
Right.
So it's hard to really discover who you really are when you're a child, because a child, as you know, evolves.
Right.
So it is. And then, what I found, when people get in relationships, sometimes you really have these two children
absolutely.
that have come together.
Fear-based children.
When they fight, oh, my goodness.
They don't fight fair, and they fight like children.
Exactly.
I think, Nathaniel, the core that you hit there was fear. When you are afraid, then it's almost impossible to be your authentic self, because that original trauma or that original wound makes you think that there's something wrong with being who you are. And so then the child tries to be someone that they're not, just to feel safe or to gain approval. And that, I think, that inability to be authentic and staying in that place of fear, staying frozen in that place of fear, is why we are in such a relationship crisis today.
Yes. So all of my work after dealing with families, after dealing with couples and marriages and depression, I discovered this entity that makes really everything simple for me.
Your fear interview, right?
Yes, the fear interview.
Let's talk more about that. Okay.
Yes. So this is a part of my work and research that after years of meeting with people and dealing with their anxiety, I came up with this fear interview, and it's really an intervention for people who have anxiety. Mm-hmm. So for me now, all I really see is fear.
Yes.
What happened was I began to deal, with the therapeutic part of people, helping them understand subconscious wounds that they were unaware of and things that were happening that they were reacting to. I would then move on many times to life coaching, which was just finding out what is it you're created to do? What is your purpose? Where is it that you get your energy from, and what takes your energy?
Right.
Then we would go on this discovery that you have this gift. You've been afraid to use it.
Yes.
And then it was the spiritual piece of who gifted you.
Yes.
What can I introduce you to this one that gifted you with this? Can you go on this discovery to find out? And then what is it that the universe gifted you to do? Right?
Yes.
So they would get closer to God, get an understanding of who God was. Mm-hmm. But as they did this, there was a clear energy that would rise up.
Of course.
Every single time. And this energy is called fear.
Yes.
And fear causes you to fight, it causes you to flight, or it causes you to be paralyzed. And it has the same effect on everybody.
Yeah.
So as we begin to do this, I begin to interview fear. So I call it the fear interview. And I talked about this, I think, on the show previously, but Michael White came up with this concept that the problem is the problem, and he would interview these problems.
Yeah.
And, whether it didn't matter
the problem
what it
is the problem.
Yes.
It's
and
so
it was
simple.
Awesome, and because it externalized the problem, whatever it was, and it made the individual understand this is not me, right?
Yeah.
You talk about that integrity.
Right.
People internalize their problems, and they begin to say, I'm just this way, or I'm just that way.
Yeah.
And so it allowed them to see that, no, you are not the problem. This is the problem. Now, we're not talking about people that don't know how to take personal responsibility, right? Because our job is to help people mature.
Yes.
And they have to see their part, right?
Yes, own it.
But it's that deception where they think that this trauma that happened to them is them.
Yes.
And that is the distinction, and really trying to help people understand the difference between them and fear.
Yeah, and as long as the fear entity is controlling that person and is who they think that they are, and they are doing everything to avoid being ridiculed, or to avoid being criticized, or to obtain approval. In the movie Revolver, the Guy Ritchie movie, the Jason Statham character calls us approval junkies. And I think that you see that a lot in relationships, where people will act, they'll lie, or they will cover up because they really think that that's the only way that they can get approval. They're afraid of the truth. And I think that, honestly, stepping into your truth and owning your own truth is the only way to be your authentic self. And I just find that there's such a shortage of people who have the courage to just be themselves in whatever situation. And so what if people don't like you? So what if they don't approve of you? At least if you're true to yourself, then you're not betraying yourself. And at the end of the day, I think that that's how we learn to stay in integrity, is by being true to yourself and not betraying yourself for the approval or the love of another.
So what's powerful, looking back when I was in school, we had to do a lot of self-reflection and self as a therapist. And I remember talking to you how frustrating it is for me when I talk to people that go to schools for therapy and counseling, and they don't have to do their own work.
Exactly.
Right? It's dangerous because
Yes.
it causes self-harm. But I remember thinking back about some of the advantages maybe I had as I looked back at this journey of becoming myself. And one of the things that became very clear to me was in my community, I remember coming home and my father was home, right? So I had a mom and a dad, but the job, my dad worked a regular job. He worked a 9 to 5, and sometimes he'd come home mad, wanting to knock us out because the man is oppressing him, and he's irritated.
Right.
But the funny thing was, I had a father that was home that I talked to a lot. And what I found was that many of my friends, if they, had a father, he might have been working and wasn't always available to talk, or they might not have had a father at all. So because I had a father, one of the advantages I had was my father gave me permission to be me.
Oh, wow.
I had a foundation where I wasn't looking to a mentor or a coach or somebody. I had a father. And my father was very about being who he was.
Well, so see, he modeled authenticity, and so he made it okay for you, and that is very rare. You know that, right?
Yeah, yes. Well, right. That's what made me go into marriage and family therapy rather than Masters of Divinity, because I saw the distinction, whether you were, a so-called Christian or not. I saw the distinction because I had a father and the confidence that it gave me.
Of course.
So that in essence, that foundation of a parent that gave me the ability. Now, on the same token, there were friends that had fathers that did not give them permission. Fathers that wanted them to be this or that, or go to that school versus this school, or I want you to have this
be a mini me.
I want you to pledge this versus that, and so that I have to say, to me, that's why I constantly talk about parenting. That it's the most important job in the world, because we are unaware that it is us that can set that foundation for our child to discover their authentic self.
Well, also it is parents who can seek to destroy it, or who are usually the ones who do destroy it, because I know for me, being adopted, my adopted father, he was like Satan incarnate, and his whole goal was to try to remake me in his image. And that was the one thing that, I saw the darkness in him, and I saw the brutality and the evil, and him trying to destroy my light. And at a very early age, I just refused. I think my greatest gift was having this, stepfather, adoptive father, who was so dark, who literally was trying to destroy my light, and who was satanic in the sense that he was the father of the lie. And, at a very early age, I was able to distinguish truth from falsehood. And what he wanted me to do was bow down to the lie. And I, as a child, I would say, well, just beat me, but I'm not going to agree with that. I cannot be who you're asking me to be. And I was willing to take the beating rather than to betray myself or to bow down to it. And most people aren't willing to do that. And I think that is where people lose their sense of self. Nothing was more true to me, more important to me as a child than being true to myself. I don't know if you can... if you have experienced that with dealing with young people who have betrayed themselves, and how bad they feel about themselves and how it destroys their self-esteem.
Oh, yeah. So, I'm really big. I talked a little bit about it before, but I had to discover this myself. I talked about, this abuse versus discipline. My father, even though he was at home, he came up in a very abusive household. So, he would come home and at times be very abusive with us, whether verbally or physically. I had probably one of those rare situations where my father got more into his spirituality versus religion. He started to read the Old Testament about how the patriarchs dealt with their son. And we went to a church, and they were really big on focusing about fatherhood. So he began to change and realized that fathers did not hit their kids but blessed their kids.
Wow.
And they laid their hands on their kids to speak blessings on them, not to hurt them or smack them. So he began to transform the way in which he interacted with us, and it's changed my life, right?
What a blessing.
When I went to school, I found out what an anomaly that was, because most people are in counseling and things of that nature because of the abuse that they experience.
Of course. In the name of love.
The religiosity. And they're really going there to try to protect people from God and religious folks. While I was there trying to show people the true health and love that was in the Bible. So, and so I had to understand too that, as I did, most people have been traumatized by religious folks.
Oh, absolutely. And they would use, and they would say this as they're beating the child, this is for your own good. And I would think, how on earth can, child abuse be for the good of a child?
So we're taught this two ways in this culture. We know that anything that you don't acknowledge, you can't change.
Exactly.
So, number one, in this country, slavery has traumatized.
Oh my God!
The slave masters, the descendants of the slave masters, and the descendants of the slaves. Right. So we have these two people that don't know how to talk about this subject. But within slavery, Christianity
was used.
Was really, manifesting and promulgating a lot of this rhetoric. So
of course.
This abuse was really being pushed through Christianity, especially in the South.
And in the name of God. In the name of God.
Spare the rod, spoil the child. That's what caused so much. And it took me a while to understand, when I went to Bible college, they taught you that if you really wanted to understand the Old Testament, you should listen to a Jewish rabbi, of course, who knows Hebrew.
Yeah, of course, the original text.
You should understand the language in the original text.
Nathaniel, you were talking about post-slavery and the trauma of slavery, and there is such a thing that is now being acknowledged as post-traumatic slavery syndrome. And I had, recently a young white female pastor who did this video that went viral, millions of responses, where she did an apology as a white person to all African Americans, not just for, slavery, but for what's happening today with police brutality. And, to my knowledge, I brought her on because this was the first time any white person had ever publicly acknowledged that we're all responsible for the sins of our fathers, and we have to acknowledge this and come together to heal it. And I think that that's why her video went viral, because it was so heartfelt and nobody had really done it publicly. So I think that this does need to be addressed, and we need to have dialogue between the victim and the victimizer in order to heal it. We can't just say, we can go on and pretend like, we're not still suffering from the effects of these things in society. I mean, look at the racism in America.
Yes, we don't know really how to have these conversations. We were talking about earlier, your true self, arrested development, being stuck in a childlike state. So many of the conversations we hear dealing with race are more of children talking. You did this to me. I didn't do this to you. I'm not responsible. that didn't happen when I was alive, so why do I have anything to do with it? So it's very immature.
Yeah.
And we don't, our news stations actually, they love this type of thing because it makes money. They're not necessarily concerned about true healing.
Of course not.
They're concerned about ratings, right?
Yes.
And that's a big part of the problem. And, so I was talking about that slavery piece and how I see it affect our community every day because most of us believe in that spare the rod, spoil the child, when in all actuality it just means if you spare teaching your children the Word of God, you will spoil them. And so we have normalized in our community abuse.
Yes.
And we call it discipline.
And we accept it,
And we don't realize, one of the stories, so I have a bunch of stories in regards of teaching the people this and watching them transform and realize, what I'm saying. And I'll never forget one father, as we were talking about this, he said, well, I think you're right, but, my beatings did me good.
Right.
Okay? And I looked at him and I said, well, sir, I'm going to do something. And please don't get mad at me. But I just want to do something. I'm going to reenact something. And I just want you to tell me what you think of. And I said, Massa beat me good. I enjoy my beatings. If Massa didn't beat me, he stopped me. He stopped me. He said, man, I said, sir, who do you sound like? He said, man, I guess I sound like Chicken George, don't I? I said, well, man. And, he laughed with me, but he also had tears in his eyes.
He got it.
He realized this was slavery.
Exactly.
And he was telling me he needed beatings, and so he needed to beat his child.
Yes.
Not realizing that this was learned behavior.
Yes.
And he didn't need beatings. He needed to be disciplined.
Exactly.
Not abused.
Cause and consequence.
People don't know the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and I chose not to beat my kids because I saw that it was devastating, watching my siblings being beaten and, me standing up and, just taking the beating because I just refused to cry. I refused to give him the satisfaction. He actually didn't enjoy beating me. He enjoyed beating his own children because they were screaming and crying, and I was just no fun. I wouldn't cry. Wow. I wouldn't bow down. So he chose to try emotional torture with me. Well, we're just going to sit here until you tell me, what I want to hear. And you bow down to some craziness. And I would just sit there until he fell asleep. Then he'd wake up and he'd forget why he was sitting there and he'd go to sleep.
Well, and this is the other thing that changed my life. I would ask children, and some of these children, there's an extremity. Like, some parents listening to this, they'll, some of them will start hearing what we're saying, maybe being overtaken with shame or guilt, and they might have spanked their child and, gave them 2 licks, and it wasn't out of control. But, as we do this work, we find and really understand that it's not necessary. But let me tell you, some of the evidence. So the other part of my evidence is I would ask children over the years. The last 7 years I've been asking children, and some of these children have been whipped with wet extension cords.
Oh, yeah, we did too.
Smacked with rulers for hours, like extremity, right?
We had leather cowboy belts and belt buckles, extension cords. Oh, it was
on them.
Yeah.
And I would say, what would you rather, a whipping, or would you rather being grounded and something taken away from you? And every single time they would say, I would rather a whipping.
Seriously?
Why?
Because they never got one.
Once it happens, it's over. And I can do what I want to do. One boy, I'll never forget, his name was Paul. He said, after my mama whips me, she feels better. But I don't even know why she hit me in the first place. Right?
But think about it. They can go on with the behavior, though.
Oh my good. Well, she wasn't in there, when he told me that. But yeah, it made her feel better. And he was pretty wise. The kid was only about 8 or 9. But as we talked about before, if his mother was traumatized earlier than him, when she got mad, she might have been 4.
Right.
So even though he was 9, he was basically telling me, man, I don't understand why my mom gets so mad and loses her temper that way.
Over
But
nothing.
hey, if she needs to get it out on me, I understand. But then I go and do what I want to do, Mr.
Anyway.
Anyway.
And see
right?
that
Because there was no clear articulation of what he did wrong. In order to discipline someone, you must be disciplined yourself.
Yes. Well, and
so
see,
that's the thing that we miss.
But that's interesting what you just pointed out, because I saw with my siblings that, the beatings didn't change anything. They still were the same behavior. They kept doing it over and over again. So it's just like, what is your point, in beating a kid? And it's exactly what you said. It was arbitrary. It wasn't, like these are the rules and you broke the rules and that's why I'm doing it.
Exactly.
It was just, I'm in a bad mood and you got in my way, so now I'm going to beat you.
And so now you're modeling, right? You're trying to teach your child discipline by being undisciplined.
Yes.
And getting angry and losing your temper, and then trying to tell them how to be disciplined, and you are actually modeling how to lose control. And so we do this, and when we talk about being your original self, being who you're supposed to be, if you have this slave mentality and slave culture on both sides,
right?
This is the thing I've really honed in on when I'm working with people, because, we're totally unaware. Our culture doesn't talk about it the right way. We have shame about it.
Of course.
But when I talk about unconditional love, right? So what I found is many, and a lot of it has to do with class. Yes. More so than anything.
Of course.
But you'll have, I see 2 major mentalities. There's the inferiority and superiority.
Of course.
Right? So slave master, he's superior.
Yes.
Slave is inferior.
Yeah.
So when I'm dealing with people, they cannot discover their authentic self because they either feel inferior or superior.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because until you realize that there is no inferior or superior, then you really can't be free to see that everyone is an emanation of God incarnate in a physical body, and you can stop looking up to people or looking to an authority figure to be your savior, because when there's no one that's better than me and no one that's lower than me, then I can go inside and I can get in touch with the God within me, and that's where most people are getting lost.
Yes, that you hit it on the head, and I know a lot of your work has to do with that. So if anybody knows that and can explain that, is you, and how much I know that you see that on a day-to-day basis, and we are so unaware of how much that has to do with slavery. One of my big things that I try to point out, especially to the white community, is the pain and trauma that they have associated with slavery.
And
when
the
we
shame.
talk about it, we always
shame.
act like this is like a problem just for us. No, it's a problem for you too.
Yeah, because whatever you do,
it hurts you.
But also, whatever you do to someone else, you're doing it to yourself, and it doesn't make you look good that you think that you're better than someone else when we're all children of God. We're all made and created in the image and likeness of God, and it's shameful, to be a racist. It's shameful to be sexist. It's shameful, and there's a part of a person who feels like, oh, well, if I am a nationalist and I believe that my nation is superior to other nations, then that makes me better than them. But, look at where nationalism has gotten Americans. We've always believed that we were the greatest and the best. And I travel all over the world, and America is literally, looked down upon because we won't acknowledge the atrocities that we have committed and continue to commit upon, other countries and upon our own people in America. We have to acknowledge it.
You're so right, of narcissism.
Yes,
right?
total
narcissism. You're the best and you can't see anybody else.
Yes. And that's the wound, narcissism is worshipped in America. I mean, it's like it's acceptable to be a narcissist.
Well, and Dr. Grant, this is one of the things that has really helped me when I'm working with people, and that is Jesus says it the best. He's down on the cross, and he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. We know that the average person has no concept of what psychology is.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
They have no concept of insight or self-awareness.
Yes.
So, Dr. Grant, the average person has no idea that they're prejudiced.
It's so true. You hear them say, I'm not a racist.
Yes. And they're being honest.
Yes.
They really don't. You know, I'm talking to men, and I'll say, oh, so you don't feel safe. What do you mean? What do you mean I don't feel safe, right? I just tapped his ego. Oh, let me use a different word. You didn't like that. Yeah, I didn't like that, right? The truth is you didn't feel safe, but the word triggered your mind to make you feel like I was calling you weak.
Uh-huh.
So now you cannot fully grasp the truth that you don't feel safe, sir, right?
Yeah.
These are things we deal with every day that aren't complex. They're very simple to us.
Right.
But the average person, they have no idea whatsoever what they're doing.
Yeah, you're right.
The average person doesn't even think about how they think, right?
Yeah.
That would give them a headache. So most of the times, no, people, they don't know they're bigots or they're racist, or they don't even know they're mad at their mother.
Yeah.
Right? They have no idea that the reason that they have depression is because, you know, they're truly angry at something their mother said, and they might hang out with her every day, still trying, coming back to this being authentic self, still trying to get her unconditional love. So I can't be who I am because I'm so concerned trying to get, I'm 40, 50 years old, and I
trying to get approval and trying to get love.
I want that approval, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be accepted. Or I still believe I am who my mom or dad, like you said that I am.
Yeah.
So they said I'm inferior, or they said I'm ugly, and you look like me, so you're ugly, or you're the ugly one.
Yeah.
You're the dumb one.
Yeah.
Or even you're the smart one when you are smart, but really you're the artistic one. You know, so we hold these concepts of our parents just trying to get unconditional love, and that's really what it is everybody wants. And when you look inward, and that's what people are afraid to do.
Yeah.
Fear makes you afraid to look in, because it tells you, you know, you're bad. And so when you look in, you're afraid to look at the things that are bad. But if I can get you to be afraid to look at the things that are on the inside, if I make you afraid of that, then you won't see what's good on the inside.
Yeah, and you won't grow either. But, you know, going back to what you said about, you know, the inferior superiority complex, most people, what has helped me a lot is when I detached from judging other people and just accepting people where they are, and then sitting back and listening to them, the ones who are narcissists and the ones who think that they're better than everybody else, I found that they just want to be heard. They just want, you know, approval. And so when you give them that approval, then that real self comes out, and that real self is that child that didn't get approval. And so I found that if I just give people unconditional approval, then that gives them permission to be themselves, and it makes them comfortable. So I found that that's a key that many people overlook. Just give people approval, no matter who they are and where they are. I want to close with talking about how much energy it takes to be fake. I think it's so much easier to find the courage to just be who you are and to speak your truth, no matter, you know, who likes it or who doesn't like it. Because I've seen people in, like, my second husband was so inauthentic and so fake. And when I called him on it, you know, and he finally, you know, felt free to be who he was, you know, I could see that relief in him. And I thought, you know, and I said to him, I said, how sad that you felt that you had to be someone else this whole time. And I felt compassion. I felt sad for him and I felt compassion for him. But at the same time, I needed to go. that relationship was never built on truth or authenticity, and he didn't know who he was. And sometimes, it's okay to just leave a relationship that, is unevenly yoked. So that's what I want to leave the audience with. So, Nathaniel, what would you like to leave the audience with on this topic?
You learn, as you're saying, you love others like you love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are critical on yourself, you're critical on others. If you are fake with yourself, you are fake with others. And, the thing that we really try to help people do is to learn to just accept yourself as you are. Learn to look at yourself. And when you are gracious with yourself, you will be gracious with others. So when people get in a relationship, you have to know that if you want somebody that's safe and that you love and that's going to be good, be safe with yourself. Love yourself. Develop yourself. You attract who you are. Always remember, you attract who you are. When you look up and you discover someone as you are in relationship, later on when you break up from them, you'll realize it was because they are not like you and you are not like them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's okay to separate, because time tells that, this person that you are in relationship with, as you grow, you'll grow apart, because time will tell if they are like you. So always remember, just work on yourself. Whatever you want from somebody else, first give it to yourself and be that, and you will attract that.